Hello, I'm Tom Taddeo, and I'd like to speak to you about our Second Amendment. We could start with the historical part of it first, and then later on look at more present-day applications. Written in 1789 by the first Congress and then ratified in 1791 by the states as being part of the original Bill of Rights. And that phrase within the amendment, right to bear arms, it wasn't a new principle or not a new concept to our founders. It was something that they had gotten from the English Bill of Rights, something they often went back to in the forming of our Constitution. They perceived the right to bear arms as a God-given, natural, or inalienable right. The reason it was held in such high regard is because they saw gun ownership, gun possession, as the necessitated force behind self-protection. We're going to take a look at a couple of quotes from founders. I have about 8 or 9 quotes altogether. These quotes will back that idea of a natural right and an individual's right. Before I get into them, and no, this isn't a plug or a commercial, I just want to say that I don't believe in the allotted time I have, even the most learned people can rightly do this amendment justice. So I would highly recommend doing some reading on it, researching it yourself. There's a lot of good books out there. Sadly, I can't even give a good book review without written consent. However, you might want to consider when you do pick up books or get stuff online, if they're not quoting the founders, if they're not citing back to them or referring to them on a regular basis, you're probably just getting some individual's opinion. Okay, that's fine, but remember who wrote it. Okay, let's take a look at this first one. This is from Sergeant George Tucker, wounded in the American Revolution, a scholar highly regarded at that time. The right of self-defense is the first law of nature. In most governments, it has been the study of rulers to confine this right within the narrowest limits possible. Whenever the rights of the people to keep and bear arms are under any color or pretext whatsoever prohibited, liberty, if not already annihilated, is on the brink of destruction. That verse will get you thinking, or that quote will. And now one from Richard Henry Lee, signer of the Declaration. To preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. Just a few more on now more of an individual's right. The Constitution should never be constructed to prevent people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms. That's from Sam Adams. And then this one from Thomas Jefferson. This doesn't seem to be anything new under the sun. This almost sounds like it was written by somebody last week, but it's one from Thomas Jefferson. The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such nature. They disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailant. Okay, moving on, militia. Probably one of the most contested words in this amendment, debated in halls across this country by great legal minds for many, many years. But what is the understanding of militia as far as in the 1700s and today? Well, before we examine both aspects of that, I just want to make a couple of statements about insurrection, because a lot of this has to do with that. And I see a lot of hosts online and statements either from individuals making very light of it, which kind of concerns me in a respect. It should concern anybody. To get an understanding of the seriousness and how serious this should be taken, there's a number of things you could do. I mean, just common sense should tell a person that, but you could study the insurrection theory, get into some deep and heavy stuff. You can even look at court cases, Dennis versus the Supreme Court in 1951, which actually made a parameter for insurrection. But if you don't want to go through all that, you could just, again, go back to our founders, geniuses, gave us the greatest constitution, creating one of the greatest nations in known history, and it was the Constitution. It's been said that it was slaves, immigrants, technology, industry, all these things. Granted, all these things had some part in the making of our country, but what all those things that I just mentioned and others have been in other nations, but they didn't accomplish what America did. It was the Constitution. Anyway, militia. A Latin word, also derived from the English Bill of Rights. They had militias in Old England. And what is it? It's twofold. It's a state or government-controlled entity, and free citizens as well. And we're going to examine both ends of that. Let's take a look at a state or government-controlled entity. The way to get an understanding of that right from the beginning is you look at an event called the Whiskey Rebellion. You look that up. It's just basically distillers in Western Pennsylvania that didn't want to pay taxes. Washington, he has a fledgling government. He sends men out there. He takes care of the problem. He nips it in the bud. Winds up not being very violent. Out of this comes the Militia Act of 1792. If you read up on it, it might say 94 because there were finalizings and revisions. And there were revisions even after that, thus giving the president control over state militias. Well, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is free citizens. Just free men defending this country against for the primary reason of a tyrannical government. Now, as I said in the beginning of this part of it, debated heavily across in halls across this country by legal minds is because they debate whether that free citizens is the state's National Guard today. Is it just that, or is it free citizens? Well, we're going to look into that. Our founders knew that you needed more than just guys you drag out of bed to defend our country against invasions from abroad and such. They realized that, and the states realized it as well. So we, out of the Militia Act, gravitates the state's National Guard. Understood. Honorable men, we need that. But what about free citizens? Let's examine, how do we back the free citizen end of it? Well, again, we'll go back to our founders. First quote I'm going to read is from a guy named Elbridge Gerry. He was one of the guys that actually wrote the Second Amendment, and I read rough drafts on it. The man was an absolute genius, a scholar in many respects. Whenever governments mean to invade the rights and liberties of the people, they always attempt to destroy the militia in order to raise an army upon their ruins. Now, I know I'm splitting hairs here, but it says whenever governments, plural. What exactly could that mean? You got to remember the period of time he's saying it in, and consider all this. But if you're wondering why it's such a complex issue, well, that's one of the reasons. If it was meant to only be a governed agency, why would he say this, the guy that penned it? And remembering that free militia is still legal in every state except Wyoming. Forgive me, I didn't look into why it's not legal there, but in every state except Wyoming. And I'm not talking about the National Guard. I mean just armed citizens, the depiction of free militia. Let's take a look at a few others. Sam Adams, another guy that had his hand in the penning of this. The militia is composed of free citizens. Easy enough. One from Thomas Jefferson. What country can preserve its liberties if the rulers are not warned from time to time that the people preserve the spirit of restraint, let them be armed? It's been understood that the primary reason for free militia or our state's National Guard, the primary reason is as a restraint, see that word again, or as a guard against a tyrannical government. And this last quote is from a Noah Webster, and it's what's going to bring us into more recent applications. Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe. The supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword. I'm going to stop there. You can replace sword with any number of military equipment. Laws by the sword, because the whole body of people are armed and constitute a force superior to any band of regular troops. Okay. Now, one would probably say, yeah, that was fine for 1700, but is it true today? Well, though there's been a lot of talk about it, and maybe too much, you might say, but I question how many have put it in a historical perspective like this. Nobody has questioned Mr. Webster's statement more so in recent times of the recent application than presidential runner-up Mr. Joe Biden in a statement he made not too long ago, basically saying that what can men with arms, people with arms, in this day and age do against the military so vast and powerful as it is. An amazing statement. It raised eyebrows by many, many people. I can only imagine our founders spinning in their graves, considering what they were up against, the mightiest force in history at that time. But many questioned it, and one counter argument of that is an oath, just an oath. Our law enforcement, to some degree, and all of our military personnel has taken an oath to defend this Constitution. And while, as in all populations, there will always be some that won't take the oath so seriously, the majority of these great and honorable men will. And they won't bow to some legislator's fancy and violate that oath, distorting or for enforcing something that's violently or easily against our Constitution. It's something that's been shown true in recent times. And then there's something else, keeping in mind that idea, whole body of people. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not a military strategist. You probably figured out by now. I'm no great orator either. But I've been around the block. And what I mean by that is I've been at the courthouse in downtown Manhattan. I've been at the state of New York, our own state, the capital there. Certainly I've been in Washington, rallying for the preservation of the right to bear arms and other constitutional reasons. And I've been to Virginia. Yeah, you've heard a lot about Virginia, where I saw thousands and thousands of people flying in, driving in from all around this country to let a governor know that he's infringing on our Second Amendment rights, more so than people would be quiet about. When I see that type of disciplined, orderly, mass of people practically transforming a town, and with no problems to speak of, I gotta think about that whole body of people. What I saw there, what I saw at the courthouse in downtown Manhattan, what I saw in all these places is a drop within a drop of the bucket of the whole body of people. If we listen to what our founding fathers said, if even a small percentage of us know the greatness and genius of these men, we'd be way ahead of the game. The whole body of people being armed. What exactly can a standing army do? It may be a very calming thought, it may be a morbid thought, but just something to think about. Folks, you could do what I'm asking you to do, study, research this. It'd be to your benefit. But at the end of the day, after the town next to you has been half burned down and looted, and there are 3 guys that just busted through your back door, and the only thing between them and your family is you with a stick, none of this stuff is going to make much difference. What is going to make a difference is if you're responsibly and in a disciplined way exercising your hard-won Second Amendment rights, and hopefully using your voice to stand by these rights. If we continue to allow our Constitution to be maligned, misrepresented in so many ways, whether it's through legislation passed while the country's distracted by something else, or just an exaggeration of some judge's decision, it's not just guns we're going to lose. It's going to be our freedom, and in entirety. I want to thank you for listening. Be brave and be strong.